The elevator doors opened with a quiet chime, revealing Matthew's penthouse, a sleek, modern space with towering windows that framed a breathtaking view of the city. Liam stepped in first, his gasp of awe filling the silence. "Whoa! Mom, look!" he exclaimed, rushing to the windows, his small hands pressed against the glass as he gazed at the endless sprawl of buildings and lights below. "It's like we're in the sky." Emma followed him, stepping into the vast space with measured steps. Her eyes scanned the room, the polished surfaces, the curated art on the walls, the sheer scale of it all. It was beautiful, no doubt, but it also felt overwhelming. Matthew appeared beside her, his presence steady but non-intrusive. He watched as Liam darted around, firing rapid questions about the view, the furniture, and whether Matthew could actually see planes flying past at this height. Emma stayed by the window, her arms crossed loosely, her gaze distant. "It's a lot, isn't it?" Matthew asked softly, breaking the quiet between them. She turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "It's not just this," she said, her voice low but steady. "It's everything. I don't want Liam to get used to something that isn't real for us, and I don't want to disappoint him." Matthew's chest tightened at her words, a flicker of guilt and understanding passing through him. He nodded, his tone gentle but certain. "Emma, I'm not here to take you or Liam away from your world. I want to be part of it. And if that means meeting in the middle, I'm more than willing." Emma opened her mouth to respond, but her gaze shifted to Liam. He had slowed his excitement. Matthew followed her gaze, then offered a small, understanding smile. "Liam," he called, his tone light and inviting. "I think I've got something you might like." Liam turned, his eyes wide with curiosity. "What is it?" "You'll see," Matthew replied, beckoning him to follow. "Come on." When Emma and Liam reached the dining area, Liam let out a delighted squeal. A beautifully set table awaited them, but what caught his attention were the miniature burgers, fries arranged in paper cones, and colorful mocktails topped with fruit slices. "This is the fanciest kids' food ever," Liam declared, bouncing on his toes. Emma raised an eyebrow at Matthew, her lips curving into a reluctant smile. "Did you plan this?" "I had a feeling Liam might appreciate something fun," he said with a shrug, his tone casual but warm. They sat down, laughter filling the space as Liam dug into his meal with gusto. He regaled them with stories from school, his enthusiasm contagious as he waved a fry around for emphasis. Matthew listened intently, his smile never faltering. When they finished, Matthew led Liam to a small nook where a sleek telescope was set up by the window. Liam's jaw dropped as Matthew adjusted it, angling it toward the night sky. "This is my telescope," Matthew said, kneeling beside him. "Let's see if we can find something cool." Liam peered through the lens, his face lighting up. "I see stars. So many stars." "That's just the beginning," Matthew said, adjusting the focus. "See that bright spot there? That's Jupiter. And if you look closely, you might spot some of its moons." Emma watched from a distance, her arms crossed as a mix of emotions swirled within her. She couldn't deny how good Matthew was with Liam, the patience in his voice, the genuine excitement he shared in her son's joy. But it also made her chest tighten, the weight of her earlier thoughts pressing harder. As the evening wound down, Emma gathered their things, her movements brisk but not hurried. Liam was still buzzing with excitement, chattering nonstop about the stars and how he was going to tell all his friends about Jupiter. "Thank you, Matthew," Emma said as she helped Liam with his coat. Her tone was polite but distant, her eyes avoiding his for longer than usual. Matthew noticed but didn't press. "It was my pleasure," he said, his voice steady despite the unease beginning to stir in him. At the door, Liam turned back to Matthew. "Can we come back and look at the stars again?" Matthew crouched to Liam's level, offering him a small smile. "Anytime, buddy. You just say the word." Liam grinned, but Emma's response was quieter. "Say thank you, Liam." "Thank you," Liam said enthusiastically, waving as they stepped into the elevator. Matthew watched them leave, his hands sliding into his pockets. Emma's goodbye replayed in his mind, the way her tone seemed lighter when speaking to Liam, but heavier when it came to him. As the elevator doors closed, he turned back to the now empty space, his chest tightening. For the first time in a long time, fear crept in. The fear of losing something, someone, that truly mattered. Matthew sat by the edge of his bed, his gaze fixed on the skyline beyond the towering glass. The city was alive, bustling with the promise of another day, but Matthew's mind was elsewhere, lingering on the night before. Emma's smile had stayed with him, the way it softened her features and lit her eyes. He couldn't stop thinking about her, the way she spoke, the ease with which she laughed, and the quiet strength she carried. And yet, no matter how vivid the memory of her smile, there was something else that lingered: doubt. It had been there in the way she avoided his gaze at times, the hesitation in her voice when she thanked him. It wasn't something he could ignore. He let out a breath, running a hand through his hair. For a man who had always been sure of himself, sure of his ability to read people, this unfamiliar uncertainty left him restless. Emma wasn't like anyone he'd known before, and for the first time, he wanted someone to see more than the wealth, the status, or the name. Matthew reached for his phone, his fingers moving decisively across the screen. His message was simple, direct, but with an undertone of warmth. "Dinner tonight, just the two of us. I'll send someone to pick you up at 8. Emma's reply comes in moments later. "Okay." Matthew set the phone down, a faint smile tugging at his lips. The answer was all he needed to feel a sense of ease. As he stood to begin his day, the lingering doubt didn't disappear entirely, but it felt more manageable. Tonight, he'd make sure Emma understood exactly how much she and Liam mattered to him. At exactly 8 p.m., a black sedan arrived outside Emma's modest home. The driver, dressed sharply in a suit, stepped out and opened the door for her. Emma hesitated for a moment, taking a breath before stepping into the car. The ride was smooth, the city blurring past her window like a painting in motion. She couldn't help but feel a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Dinner with Matthew, just the two of them, felt significant, almost too significant. When the car finally stopped, Emma stepped out, her heels clicking softly against the pavement. A man in a tailored uniform greeted her with a polite nod, confirming her name. "Ms. Martin? Right this way, please." Emma followed him, her brows furrowing slightly as they entered through a side door of the building. Instead of the expected grand entrance of a restaurant, they walked through a bustling kitchen. Chefs moved with practiced precision, the air filled with the rich aromas of herbs and spices. It wasn't what she expected, and the confusion on her face grew as the man led her through the organized chaos. But when he opened a final door, everything else faded away. The balcony was a masterpiece of understated elegance, the kind of setting that made time stand still. Emma stepped forward, her breath catching as she took it all in. The view was stunning, the atmosphere warm, inviting, and utterly romantic. And then there was Matthew, standing near the edge of the balcony, his hands casually in his pockets. He turned as she entered, his expression softening when he saw her. "Emma," he said, his voice warm. "Thank you for coming." She could only nod, still speechless. No one had ever done anything like this for her before, and yet a thought lingered at the back of her mind. Matthew had the means to do this for anyone. Was this truly special, or was it simply effortless for him? Matthew stepped closer, searching her face. For a man who rarely doubted his ability to impress, her reaction left him uncertain. Was she impressed? Or was this all too much? Before he could second-guess himself further, Emma broke the silence. She looked around, her gaze finally settling on the chef, who was meticulously plating an appetizer. "This is beautiful," she said softly. Then, with a faint smile, she added, "Though I wasn't expecting him." Matthew chuckled, the tension easing. "Don't worry, he's more focused on making the perfect dish for us than anything else. He probably wouldn't notice if we left until after dessert." Emma laughed, her shoulders relaxing. She looked at him, her expression more open now. "I'm not used to this." Matthew met her gaze, his tone light. "Let's enjoy dinner first. Who knows? By the end of the night, this might just become your preferred way to eat." She laughed again, the moment easing into something more natural. As they sat down, the conversation flowed easily, touching on the new program and its progress, their shared hopes, and even light-hearted anecdotes that made them both laugh. As the chef placed delicate slices of tiramisu on their plates, Matthew leaned back in his chair, a small, mischievous smile playing on his lips. "You know," he began, his tone teasing, "if Liam's soccer moves are anything like his aim when he hit me with that ball, I think I might have found the next Beckham." Emma chuckled, shaking her head. "You're giving him too much credit. That shot was more luck than skill." Matthew leaned in slightly, raising an eyebrow. Or maybe it was a warning, his way of saying, "Stay away from my mom, or there's more where that came from." That did it. Emma burst into laughter, the sound spilling out unrestrained as she tried and failed to stifle it behind her hand. It wasn't just the joke, it was the way Matthew delivered it, the unexpected humor that felt so at odds with his polished exterior. Her laughter rang out, filling the balcony with warmth. For a moment, she forgot where she was, caught up entirely in the joy of the moment. As Emma's laughter ebbed, she caught Matthew's gaze. His expression was soft, almost tender. And for a moment, she felt the pull of something unspoken between them. But then the weight of her thoughts returned, grounding her. "This is all so wonderful, Matthew. But where do Liam and I fit in all of this?" The question hung in the air, and Matthew shifted in his seat, the easy warmth from before replaced by something more measured. He straightened slightly, his voice calm and composed as he began to speak. "Emma, you and Liam would fit perfectly. I've thought about this, how I can make things easier for you. There's no reason for you to worry about struggling anymore. I could provide for Liam's education, help with your work, even give you the space to pursue whatever you've always dreamed of." Emma's smile faded completely, replaced by a look of quiet disappointment. She set down her fork, her hands resting in her lap as she met his gaze. "Matthew," she said softly, her voice steady but firm, "I'm not a project." and I'm not looking for someone to make things better or easier for me." Her words were calm, but the undercurrent of emotion was unmistakable. She paused, collecting her thoughts. "I've been in a relationship where I compromised everything. When Liam's dad left, it wasn't just me he abandoned. It was his son. I won't put Liam through that again." Matthew's chest tightened as her words hit home. He hadn't meant to make her feel that way, but as he replayed his response in his mind, he saw how carefully it had been crafted, like a pitch, not a declaration. For all his success in negotiation, he found himself utterly at a loss for the right words. For the first time, Matthew realized that this wasn't about persuading Emma to trust him. It was about earning her trust in a way that felt natural, real, and unconditional. As Matthew's car pulled up outside Emma's apartment, the silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that held words unspoken. Words he wished he could find the courage to say. He stepped out to open her door, a gesture as natural as breathing, but tonight, it felt different. As she climbed out and turned to face him, there was a quiet finality in her smile, a warmth that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good night, Matthew," she said softly, her voice gentle. "Good night, Emma," he replied, his tone steady, though his heart ached with the weight of what he didn't say. He watched her walk to her front door, each step measured and deliberate, until she finally disappeared inside. The door closed with a quiet click, but it echoed in his chest like a heavy thud. Standing there, the night air cool around him, Matthew felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years: loss. He had never known love like this, raw and uncertain, and as he climbed back into the car, he admitted to himself the truth he could no longer deny. He loved her. He loved her laughter, her strength, the way she made the world feel brighter simply by being in it. But as he drove away, the streetlights casting fleeting patterns of light across his face, another thought settled heavily in his chest. He was losing her, and for the first time in his life, Matthew Harrington didn't know how to fix it. Over the past few days, Matthew had felt the distance growing. Emma's texts were polite but brief, her focus almost entirely on Liam. Even when they met at the park or Liam's soccer practice, the easy warmth that had once defined their connection seemed to falter. And tonight, when Liam had eagerly asked about visiting the penthouse again, Emma's answer had been another gentle deflection. Homework, bedtime, maybe another time. But Matthew had reached his limit. He couldn't let this slip away. Not when he knew how deeply he cared, not when he had so much left unsaid. Matthew hadn't planned on this visit. He didn't think, not even when he buzzed her apartment number, the sound of the rain a steady rhythm against his coat. When Emma's voice came through the intercom, tinged with surprise, he spoke simply. "It's me. I need to talk to you." The door buzzed open, and before long, he found himself standing outside her apartment, his heart pounding as he waited for her to answer. When the door opened, Emma stood there in sweatpants and a cozy sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Her surprise melted into something softer as she took in his rain-soaked form. "Matthew," she said, stepping back slightly. "Come in. You'll catch a cold out there." The apartment was warm, the kind of warmth that wrapped around you and made you feel at home. Matthew hesitated for a moment before stepping inside, his gaze sweeping the room. "Is Liam asleep?" he asked softly, almost as though he might disturb the boy. Emma nodded, glancing toward the hallway. He's in his room. He was out like a light after his homework. She offered him a small, reassuring smile before moving to a linen closet. Let me grab you something to dry off. Emma, Matthew said, his voice quiet but firm. She paused, turning to him, the towel forgotten in her hands. There was something in his expression that made her heart skip. Vulnerability. I can't leave tonight without telling you this, he began, stepping closer. Rainwater dripped from his hair, but he didn't seem to notice. His gaze held hers, steady and unwavering. At the dinner, he began, his voice thick with emotion. I didn't say what I needed to say. I talked like I was trying to convince you, like I was pitching some plan. But that's not what I want. Not with you. Emma's breath hitched, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the towel. Matthew stepped closer, his voice dropping lower, more intimate. I don't want to help you because I feel like I should, or because I think I can fix things. I want to help because I love you, Emma. You and Liam. Her eyes widened, her lips parting in a soft gasp, but he didn't stop. The words spilled out now, raw and unfiltered. When I'm with you, I feel like the man I've always wanted to be. You make me see the world differently, in ways I never thought I could. And Liam, his voice broke slightly. Liam makes me believe in a future I never thought I'd have. Emma's eyes glistened, but Matthew pressed on, his voice trembling. You're the first thing I think about when I wake up, and the last thing I think about before I fall asleep. You and Liam, you're everything I didn't know I was missing. And now that I've found you, I can't let you go. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing with his words. She had never seen him like this, so open, so utterly unguarded. He took a shaky breath. I don't have all the answers. I don't know exactly how this will work. But I know one thing. I love you. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving it to you if you'll let me. Emma stared at him, her own emotions threatening to overwhelm her. She saw everything in his face, the sincerity, the fear, the love. It was everything she had longed to hear and everything she had been afraid to believe in. Setting the towel aside, she stepped closer, her hand trembling as she reached up to touch his face. Her thumb brushed a raindrop from his cheek, her touch soft and lingering. Do you think we can make this work? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Matthew's hands rose to gently hold hers against his face, his gaze locking with hers. With everything in me, he said, his voice filled with unshakable certainty. I'm sure. The room seemed to still around them, the moment stretching as Emma's lips curved into a soft, tearful smile. And then, before either of them could say another word, she leaned up and kissed him. It was slow at first, tentative, filled with all the emotions neither had dared to fully express. But as his arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer, the kiss deepened, filled with a passion that had been building between them for so long. Emma's hands gripped his shirt, anchoring herself to him, while Matthew held her as though she were the only thing keeping him standing. The rain outside blurred against the windows, forgotten in the warmth of their embrace. The next morning, Matthew stood by the window, sipping coffee from a mug that didn't quite fit his hand, gazing at a view so different from his penthouse, but no less meaningful. Emma stepped into the room, her hair still tousled, wearing just a cozy sweater that hinted at the intimacy they had shared. She smiled, leaning against the doorframe. "I hope you made coffee for me too," she teased. Matthew grinned, lifting his mug. "I did, but I'm pretty sure I'll never be allowed back here after you taste it." She walked over, her smile playful. "You'd be hard to replace after last night." Their laughter softened as he pulled her close, their kiss filled with warmth and quiet affection. Before the moment could linger, a small voice rang out, "Matthew!" Liam sprinted into the room, his face lighting up as he launched himself into Matthew's arms. "You're here!" As Matthew held the boy close, Emma stood by, her smile soft and unguarded. For Emma, she saw the man beneath the wealth and polish, the man who had opened his heart to her and her son, who had chosen them not out of obligation, but out of love. And for Matthew, the weight of his confession lifted as he held her close. For the first time in his life, he felt truly seen, truly understood. In that moment, as Liam laughed in his arms and Emma's hand brushed his, Matthew felt something he had searched for his entire life. His thoughts drifted back to something Gwen had once told him. People matter more than money. She had been right. Despite all the riches and success Matthew had achieved in his life, it was in that very moment that he finally felt truly fulfilled.